Lesson 2, we're measuring and classifying angles. So once again, we're going to look at how to identify one, how to label one, and how to name one. An angle looks like two rays that have joined together at their common endpoint called the vertex. So we have two rays with one common endpoint, and they would go on in either direction there. That would be an angle. The ways to label an angle, there's more than one. We could write a number inside the angle near the vertex. So, for example, we could put a little 1 in here. That would be angle 1. Or we could label the vertex with a capital letter, let's say B. Or, and this is probably the most common way, to actually name a point on each ray and the vertex. And we're going to look at how to name it. The angle symbol, and then the 1, if that's how it's labeled, or B, if that's how it's labeled, or if it has all three, then you need to write all three letters. The most important thing on that part is that if you do have to do it that way, your middle letter needs to be the vertex. So you cannot say angle CAB or ACB. You have to do, you could do CBA or you could do ABC. You just have to have that vertex in the middle. So I could name this angle CBA, and that would be how I would name it. Okay. We also need to know how to classify them by their measurements. Now, using a protractor is something that most of you have had experience doing, but if you have any trouble at all, I will be happy to help you with that in the classroom. What you need to understand is that angles that measure from 0 to 180 degrees are the kinds of angles that we're talking about. When you were in lower school, you talked about angles that were a little bit bigger than that. They're not actually angles, and we will only deal with angles that are from 0 to 180 degrees, so nothing wider than a straight line. Acute angles are between 0 and 90. So if you measure the angle and it's 80 something, 50 something, 20 something, then it's an acute angle. Right angles have only one type of measurement, and that's exactly 90 degrees. Obtuse angles are anywhere between 90 and 180. So if it's 91, or if it's 100, or it's 179, then it's an obtuse angle. If it's exactly 180 degrees, then it's a straight angle, and it looks like a straight line. So a protractor is what we use to measure the angles. That's what this thing is up here. And I think most of you, again, have had experience using a protractor. And of course, understanding the idea between acute and obtuse is what will help you make the most sense of those numbers that are on the protractor, because you get two choices each time you look at that protractor. If it's an acute angle, of course, you're using the number that's less than 90. If it's an obtuse angle, you're going to use the number that's larger than 90. Okay? There are other ways to classify angles, especially when we're talking about a pair of angles. So two angles that together add up and have a sum of 90 are called complementary. If you have two angles that together add up to 180 degrees, then they are called supplementary. Angles that are adjacent share a side. That's all they share, the side and the vertex, but no inside. So for example, if we had an angle here and then we had an angle there. So we have two angles and they are adjacent. We have angle 1 and angle 2. They're right next to each other. Vertical angles are angles that are opposite. They form an X, so we have an angle here and we have an angle here. And again, if I numbered those, that would be angle 1, angle 2. Angle 3 and angle 4 are also vertical, as you can see. Here is something that's very interesting. Vertical angles are congruent. And what is congruent? Angles that have exactly the same measurement. So angle 1 and angle 2 are the same size. Angle 3 and angle 4 are the same size. That is not necessarily true of adjacent angles. I could have a small angle like this next to a really big one. So now on that particular drawing, I have angle 1 and I have angle 2. They are adjacent. They're also something else. Look at your other words. There are a couple of things, maybe. They're adjacent and they're supplementary because together they form a straight line, which is 180 degrees. So I'd like you to look with me at this drawing. We've got a lot of angles going on in here. See if you can find two angles that are complementary. Complementary. That means together they add up. Together they add up to 90 degrees. This one and this one. Together, the outside edges form a right angle. This one and this one. Together, the outside edges form a right angle. Very good. Now, what about two angles that are supplementary? Meaning together they create a straight line. There's a lot of them on here. How about this angle with this one? Together, the outside edges form a straight line. So they are adjacent and they are supplementary. This one. And if I go through that other line and say this big one, they are supplementary. Not three angles, but this angle here, ooh, ooh, and this one. Those two angles are adjacent and they're supplementary. Now, can you find some that are vertical? Vertical angles. How about this one and this one? They're vertical. And remember, that means they're also congruent to each other or they're the same size. We could also say this one and this one. They're vertical. They're vertical and they're acute. They're both smaller than 90 because they're the same size, so they both are. All right, well, you're going to be doing something like this on your worksheet, and I will be here to help you if you have any trouble. Good luck.